Hi, my name is Andy Nguyen and I've no-lifed keyboards for over 3 years. Today we're talking about one of the most well-known names in keyboards, TGR. TGR is the brand of an individual named Yuxi. They're not the oldest keyboard maker or designer, but they're one of the most well-known brands because of their history and their collaborations. Their group buy runs were small, so there's not a lot floating around on the market. As a normie who's not in the OG crowd, all I've observed is that these keyboards are renowned for their sound and feel and are very collectible. The TGR Janes are known to be one of the most expensive keyboards on the market. During the peak of the pandemic and stimulus checks, they were confirmed sales of $7,000 for a single TGR Jane keyboard. It was ridiculous. When I personally got into the hobby, I was able to type onto some of the Jane V2s in 2020, even a Jane V2 CE. They were TKL keyboards, aluminum top and bottom housing, brass weights, and a Toblerone weight. What a Toblerone is this weight in the back right here. It's like a triangular prism. That's it. It's the candy. It's the candy. From the front, it looks like this. TKL, TGR right here. That's how you know. The original V2 was top mount only with an external brass weight. It had the recognizable aluminum backing with the TGR design. Looked a little bit like this one. Mostly it was the corners. On this unicorn right here, it's also TGR right there. These rounded little fillets for the bump-ons. The Jane V2 CE had carbon fiber backing and an internal brass weight with a rainbow Toblerone. The Jane V2 CE GB was actually pretty drawn out and delayed. They definitely missed their deadline, but people weren't very bothered. We'll get into it in a minute. Both the Jane V2 CE and Jane V2 had a very old school sound, not foamy or gasket. It wasn't really popularized at that time. It was a very dry sound. That's how I would describe it today. I want to take a moment to thank our channel sponsor, Factor. I know it's a little gloomy right now, but summer is coming and sometimes we're too busy to cook and eat well. Skip the grocery store trip, chopping, prepping, cleaning up, especially the cleaning up, man. I don't have that many pots and pans and the dishwasher gets full fast. So you can go straight to eating a delicious meal without any of that. Take a bite of this here pork chop. Oh, that looks delicious. I know the camera's far away, but I'll show you. The meat prices out there be wild right now, so it's really hard to budget ingredients to make tasty meals. I'm a little bit bigger since the last time I talked about Factor, but your boy did bust out a 425-pound squat with ease the other day. Thanks to eating healthy with options like Factor. Unfortunately, as I work out more, I've had a lot of cravings to eat fast food. Factor meals are both healthier and cheaper than going out to eat, so really consider them. I've had prepped food before and often it's typically bland with very few ingredients. Honestly, these meals are nicer than even what I would cook myself because there's so many ingredients and none of it's cheap, high quality. If all this sounds good to you, head to factor75.com and use code ANDV50 and get 50% off your first box. Thanks to Factor for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to it. Even when I was new to the hobby, there were options like the TX Keyboards TX87 SE. I could get very close to this sound. Of course, it didn't have the heft or the aesthetic or the heritage, but in terms of clean clack and nice spacebar, it was damn close. The interesting thing about the Jane V2 CE is that the fulfillment period was dragging into the pandemic. It was delayed pretty badly, but the TGR name and heritage spiked so high that the aftermarket value climbed astronomically. And it was something most people didn't even have in hand, and they were GB buyers. So a lot of GB participants were not even that angry about the delay. They were sitting on gold. Now, is it the proper way to view being screwed by the vendor? No, but the ends justify the means, right? The TGR boards that I'm aware of are the TGR Jane V2 and V2 CE, both TKLs. In terms of Alice layouts, there's a TGR Alice. I tried a few in person and they sound and feel great in hand. Definitely not something where I'm like, oh my God, this must be expensive. I didn't even know until I saw a little TGR on the front. When they were being sold for $4,000 plus, the friends I knew that owned them never dailied them. And when I say daily, I mean like type on it to game, work, shoot the shit on Discord, whatever. They just honestly kept them as showpieces in their room. Except Black Simon who scuffed his. In terms of 65%, there was the TGR 910 and there were a ton of variants. OG 910, SE, CE, RE aluminum, RE polycarbonate, VKC, which I'm lucky enough to own right here. ME, which is a modern one, and the GAF, which is a modern one as well. There's a lot of these. The old ones definitely varied in sound and personally fell behind in terms of sound compared to the Jane. but like most TGR boards, very collectible. In terms of 6%, there's a collab with Singa. This is the TGR Unicorn. This is the R2.1, and there was an R1 that's kind of like in the same timeline as the original Jane V2, V2 CE, and the other 910s. The Unicorn feels more modern because it is, and it's more of a collab rather than the original design by Yuxi. Like I mentioned, I feel like a lot of the design elements is just the weight itself. So that's the TGR influence. We also have the TGR Alice collab right here. Has the TGR style weight again. You can see how there's a cutout for the bump-ons, and it has dolphin sides, which is the sculpted side you see here. I have one here and it sounds okay. It looks great, but like other Alice boards, personally, I think it takes up too much space on the desk. Another keyboard is actually the TGR Tomo, right here. This is a modern one. It's not a remake of an OG board, but it is TGR design with monoke. Good clean top mount sound. It can also be coming O-ringed. This is what Olive should look like. If you're a vendor that's having trouble with your colors, maybe change the lighting in your editing studio. I personally don't know how long 75% keyboards have been around, but they definitely have felt more new when I came to the hobby starting in 2019. Back then it was 60, 65 TGR Alice and 40s, but they're weird. And 75s kind of became popular after the Satisfaction 75 from Canon Keys. And then from there, almost everything had a 75% knob. Variants of the Alice, I forget to mention, there is the Police, which is the PC version. And there's probably others that I'm missing, but TGR has been around for a long time. At this point, a lot of these boards can be considered vintage or old. The Jane and Alices are no longer $7,000, but probably can't be bought for anything less than $3,500 at best. They're collector pieces and honestly do not have that pristine, clean sound that is achievable with other boards in 2022 and now 2023. The cost of these keyboards sounds ridiculous, right? You may be curious, Andy, is this normal in custom keyboards? Honestly, not really. You're talking about the luxury collector pieces at the top of the hobby. At one point, a lot of keyboards were $2,000 plus, like Key Colts, Bowers, and Unicorns, and anything TGR. But that really isn't the case anymore now in 2023, especially the Bauer. I've seen the design of the Bauer, the vendor, be very proud that the aftermarket price of the Bauer was so high, 2,000 plus, but these days you can get them for $800 or less. It's still above the retail price, but barely at that point. I think a lot of the high prices were due to the stimulus checks and the fact that no one was doing anything else. Everyone was stuck inside. So is there a reason to buy these TGR boards? I've recently personally acquired the TGR 910 BKC. I don't think it's worth spending thousands of dollars for it. That's why I held off for so long, but I ended up getting an offer I couldn't refuse. In terms of alternatives, the Keeps for All Freebird TKL is a mainstream keyboard with an unlimited GB that uses Jane internals. What does that mean? It uses the Jane mounting points and a Jane plate. That means theoretically it should share a lot of the sound and feel characteristics of the Jane. Of course, internal case design, material, and other design considerations will have a large effect on the sound and feel. It was much more hollow than the Janes, but at least you have the different mounting styles like top mount and O-ring, so you can try to experiment and modify that board if you're okay with the fact that that company couldn't figure out how to QC colors. A little bit more rare, we have what my community calls like K-pop clones. There's an interesting overlap with K-pop enthusiasts and keyboard enthusiasts. So there are a few keyboards that more or less clone internals of the TGR Janes and just change the engraving on the front. So instead of saying TGR up here, it's just a K-pop artist name. They could even use the same manufacturer as Yuxi originally used, yielding a nearly identical product with some more customization. Who knows? They do exist and people are aware of their sound and feel and end up propping their price extremely high. They're typically smaller runs by enthusiasts, so there's not going to be like 200, 300 units available. Yes, we're still talking about keyboards here, and people are willing to pay over $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 just to get a Jane with their favorite artist name on it. It's an interesting level of customization and access to endgame that I don't quite understand. You see, keyboard makers were originally enthusiasts themselves. A lot of them picked up design as they delved into the hobby, learned how to communicate design and a concept to a manufacturer to get a keyboard made. As for tricks of the trade and how to make the best sounding keyboard, a lot of it is trial and error. As of talking with a handful of designers in 2022, the design standards, there aren't any, really. You have a good idea of what something will sound like, but you won't really know until you shell out a prototype keyboard. And in terms of the prototype, if you made a good sounding and feeling keyboard with minimal cost, you could sell it. And that's how these K-pop boards came to be. Unfortunately, they became a prime target for price fixing on the aftermarket and under the table deals. If you knew the right people, you could skip the raffle, get access to keyboards for the cost of manufacturing, and you can get permission to sell it for market value and make a pretty penny. It's not illegal, it just happens. One of the most common distribution methods of these sought after keyboards and artisan keycaps, even sometimes keycaps themselves, is through the raffle system. What that means is you enter a raffle for the chance to pay full price retail for a certain item. That's because of the high demand and low supply. They could also do first come first serve style sales where they can just put on a website and everyone has the same access to the internet, to the page, and be able to buy it. Whoever checks out fastest gets it. But raffles are a little bit more common. A lot of time they just have a Google Doc up, you enter, and then they contact the winners that way. Who's to say that they don't cherry pick some of their friends to win the keyboard or the artisan and leaves everyone else hanging? Who knows? But one thing I've seen in the hobby is the kind of well-known people that are friends with a lot of people typically win a lot of raffles. As the hobby slowed down and designers have been less motivated to take on the stress of more public group buy runs, because the reality is a 20 unit small run, that's 20 times, I'd say $600, is $12,000. That's a lot of money, but it isn't as much as say a 300 unit run or a 500 unit run through multiple vendors and international shipping. In peak pandemic in like mid 2020, early 2021, any group buy, if it was hype enough, would sell out instantly. So you would have like 50 units. Within seconds, all the units were gone. And if you weren't there, if you had something to do, or if your boss called you for a meeting, or you were out hiking or something, that's it, man. Done. And everyone just waits until the units ship, and then there's extras, and whoever had the unit could probably and possibly sell it for like double the price, 3 times the price. That was just the reality at the time. But these days, when extras units are sitting in the store, an example would be the Primus. That group buy is pretty big, and the extras units were sitting on the site for a long time. Another one would be the Iron 165 R2, Iron 180. It's just vendors don't want to hold on to stuff. It just doesn't make a lot of financial sense. So if things aren't selling out as quickly, they're less likely to take on bigger projects. So now you're a designer, so the likelihood of you being able to continually do these passion projects, make a little bit of profit, and make new products and stay financially sound is dwindling. It's kind of fading away. What you can do now is like cash out. Instead of doing small runs year after year, why not just modify your design, cash out on the name a little bit, make a product that can be manufactured more easily by any factory, and run rolling drops. What I mean by this is, instead of 20 units over the course of a year, why not do 50 units every quarter? And keep selling until the market is saturated with product. Or you can do an unlimited run and have all the stress all at once, but get a huge return on investment. You've already done the work to provide quality product, have a following, and probably want to spend your energy doing other things in your life. So in comes the Jane V2 ME and the 910 ME. So right here is the Jane ME. And the 910 ME. I mentioned these boards in the beginning. They are similar to their like old vintage counterparts, but are not using the brass bottom weight. It saves a lot of cost. How does the Jane ME differ from the V2 CE? Well, the bottom is magnetized and there's no screws. It has F13, which is where this little kiwi is sitting, little cutie. The bump-ons are changed, and also the side seam is more exaggerated than the original. In terms of the sound, the Gummer O-ring has better sounding alphas in my opinion, and the spacebar sounds a little bit less full. The top mount is the opposite. Great spacebar, full sound, slightly weaker alphas. This is a little bit typical of top mount and gummy O-ring compatible keyboards, as it has to account for both mounting styles, so you give up a little bit. What about the 910? The 910 now has a bottom plate like the original SE did, but it's using monocue bump-ons instead of a circle. It's using the same magnetic bottom. I personally hate this magnetic bottom. The original 910 blocker had rattle, so the blocker is now screwed in. And to be in line with the Jane, it has a tilt around weight. Of course, both are now brought into the modern era with USB-C instead of USB Mini. Oh yeah, did I mention that the $7,000 Jane V2 CE was USB Mini? That's like printer cables. So do they sound as good as the keyboards that paved the way before them? I think the Jane ME is very close and authentic to the original Jane sound. It has a deep, dry TKL sound. Of course, without the big internal weight, it probably does not sound as good. It's really close though. Like if I was able to get a Jane ME, I'd probably be good. Like I wouldn't go out of my way to spend thousands of dollars for something else. In terms of the sound of these boards, the Jane ME can be considered hollow by some, and that's just what I expect. And that's just because most mono keyboards are more foamy sound, and you kind of make that the new normal. I feel like the loss of the brass weight seems to be more aesthetic than anything, and the sound is decent. In my opinion, the 910 ME is the weaker of the two. It sounded extremely weak with the MX Browns on polycarbonate. But that probably had something to do with the fact that those are really bad MX Browns that I built it with. It just doesn't have as full of a sound as the TKL, and the spacebar is a bit weak. I originally thought that the VKC sounded better than the 910 ME, but that's because the VKC that I got was built with Band-Aid mod, which means there's a little sticker beneath the stabilizer, which made the mod sound better. So once I took off the little pad, that hollowness came rushing back. So both the 910 ME as well as the VKC, which is the old one, they both need force break to make it sound better. And that just feels bad in a nice endgame TGR keyboard, whether it's the old one or the new modern one that's made it to be a little bit cheaper. Force breaking these boards, just like PCB foaming or case foaming them, it's okay, but when you have to do it to make it sound decent, it's a drag. So the 910s are a collector piece. They are not as good sounding as the Janes. It's gonna be up to you. I really enjoy my TGR 910 VKC, but that's because it's Vietnamese keyboard community and I'm Vietnamese. That's most of the reason why. And the big brass weight, patinaed, part of history, all that, I'm kind of down with, but gotta admit, the sound is just not that good. So the 910 ME is probably the same kind of tier as a VKC, but without that brass weight, it's definitely lighter in the hand. Not too light because the Toblerone adds some heft to it, but the whole purpose of the ME variants is to be more accessible and that they're going to sell more. So that is a good thing. Over time, the aftermarket value of these should be the retail cost. That's not something you can say about the Janes and the 910s, the original ones anyway. Another unfortunate reality that I'll briefly mention is clone keyboards exist. No, I'm not talking about some Bush League plastic Chinese clone. I'm talking about high tier skill cloning that can 100% clone a keyboard inside and out, even to the packaging. The reality is these keyboards are not very complicated things. They're hard to design from scratch, but in terms of finished design, once it's all kind of dialed in, it can be measured and replicated. So the mere existence of said clones will diminish your investment in a collector piece like the TGR Jane. Not that you should invest in keyboards at all, I'm just giving you another reason why it's probably a bad idea to overpay for one of these things. I'm not gonna tell you how to get them, but they do exist. Just like how I don't buy clone keycaps, what is the point of getting a clone keyboard? However silly the collectible aspect of the hobby sounds, it's the one reason to even consider having a TGR Jane, Alice, 910, whatever. The whole point is to have an authentic bona fide TGR keyboard because it's a part of keyboard history. That's kind of how I view it. Now to have a clone, why not just buy another keyboard? In terms of sound, feel, you can get more features, lower cost, cooler aesthetic, LEDs, OLEDs, knobs. Why get a clone of an old keyboard? To lie to people, I have this real Louis Vuitton bag. I don't get it. So back to the ME keyboards, I mentioned a little bit, but my main gripe about these damn things is the magnetic bottom plate. You see, there's no screws there. What you have to do to open it up, God. Oh! I got it up, but then I dropped it. Oh! You stick a little knife in here and you wedge it up and you get some leverage and you pop it off. This makes me hate the build process and it makes me hate rebuilding. It's not as bad as Keycode's current 265 assembly process, but it's pretty close. No matter how many times you build it, I built these things twice already. Each, it never feels any easier. After building it a few times, I figured out a trick, which was to first wedge it up, then stick something in there to hold it in place, then use a tool to wedge it up harder, then stick my fingers in, and then pull it off. Now, the main question of the video is, are the original TGR boards worth it in 2023? I personally never sought out a TGR Jane V2CE. The Jane TKL became such a meme amongst enthusiasts. You would collect a bunch of keyboards, spend 5 digits, you have hella GMK, all these switches, and you just think to yourself, man, I just want to sell everything and just buy a Jane and quit. That's a load of crap. The keyboard hobby is very communal. The enjoyment of the hobby is based on your experience and how it relates to other people who share the same interests as you. Why would you want to leave and have one of the most sought after TKLs? So if the people in the hobby want it, you feel cool because you have and they don't. You feel valued because of that. If you leave the hobby, that value is gone. So why would I get some old decrepit keyboard that uses USB-A, no modern features, no LEDs or anything, and then leave? Honestly, TGR Janes, when you're looking at the top, come on, look at this. It is a silver rectangle. Of course, the naming is here, TGR, but it's just a rectangle, bro. I know I'm explaining how these boards are just decent and not even the best and how silly the collectability is, but I am very happy about the TGR 910 VKC. This is my unit. The other Janes I'm borrowing, thanks to my community, and the Dulles too, I'm borrowing that one, and the Tomo. I'm holding on to a lot of people's keyboards. I'm really happy about this board because of the history of it being involved with other Vietnamese enthusiasts. That's it. It doesn't sound as good as other 65s. Like the Type 65 Plus sounds better. The Marisi Sessi and the House don't need force break, but I don't have a personal connection with those. I know it sounds silly to y'all, but I am a proud Vietnamese man. If anyone ever sees it, I'll explain to them what it is. It's authentic. It's not a clone. It makes me happy. That run for VKC will never happen again. So for that reason, you could say I'm drinking the damn Kool-Aid of this damn hobby. The sound of the board is not that good. Some people will be coping and saying it sounds more resonant and open, but those words are just synonyms for hollow, depending on the ear of the beholder. The sound of modern keyboards is just cleaner and better than the older keyboards. Because technology progresses, okay? So force break, VKC, and it sounds okay now. Some people have paid over $3,000 for this keyboard, and it needs like 5 cents of tape to make it sound better. That's just bonkers, okay? I'm sorry, it's just bonkers. If you want to look closely, the board has anno mismatch from the top and bottom. You can see that the bottom is darker. The original boards were not good. Like, it's bad manufacturing. The sound isn't great compared to modern boards, but if you enjoy it, you're gonna use the crap out of it. I'm gonna use the crap out of the VKC. It's a great board for me because I've gone to the point where I'm not looking for the best sound and feel anymore. I'm looking for some kind of story. I'm looking for some kind of emotional attachment. You've seen the E-Yellow Unicorn video, story behind it. That's why it's a keeper. I have the Kohaku, which is his own story, and now I have this VKC 910. That's me personally and how I kind of rationalize this crazy hobby. I've minimized my collection and I'm only keeping a few things, and those 3 are never gonna go. I just want to talk about the TGR Tomo, which is a modern TGR board. I briefly mentioned it before, but it is a 75%, but no offset arrows right here, no offset navigation, and a top right blocker right here. It's a very clean 75% layout with minimal footprint. And of course the back that shows off the TGR styling. It's a great look, great sound. It's just not what people expected. When this group buy happened in June 2021, very much peak pandemic, right? A lot of people FOMO'd into that keyboard. They saw the fake TGR Jane sale at 7,000. They saw that people were selling and buying it for like 4,000 plus. They're like, oh, if I get this and hold on to it, one day it's gonna be worth that much. But it was like an unlimited group buy. So people bought it sight unseen, literally. The way the group buy works is the designer, vendor send a unit to a streamer and they build it on stream, they review it, maybe make a video, and people use that video and that stream to decide whether or not they want to buy that keyboard, because they'll have a prototype unit and you can tell in hand or like in your ears of the streamer having it in hand whether or not it's worth it. People were so scared that it was going to sell out that people just bought it just because it said TGR on it. So the TGR appeal was wild. But the reality is that 910s, the Janes, and the Alices, the scarcity is why it was valued so high. With a bigger unlimited group buy, it doesn't work the same. So these people joined in to get a flippable keyboard. This was not the case. The sound of the Tomo is decent, don't get me wrong, but not remarkable. At $525 in group buy, it was not a cheap keyboard to say the least. So with the expected delays, people wanted to sell it off before it even shipped. So after that first wave of emotions, you realize, dude, like, what did I buy again? Why did I buy it? So when you buy things because other people say so, or you're trying to make money and you don't buy for yourself, this is what can happen. After a bit over a year, it shipped and tons of people were selling. Vendors had, and still have, it in stock as extras. The keyboard was simply not that much of a hit. It was not like the Jane, and people hopped in for the TGR simply because of FOMO. And as for the ME boards, honestly, getting them easily for the price of retail is probably the peak of the hobby in my opinion. It's the best that could happen. Yeah, it's a dumb weight mounting system, but It's very accurate to the old sound and feel and a little bit more modern. Yeah, no brass weight, but at least there's nothing to patina. Although it's not as rare as the original boards, you get something that has some kind of influence from a historical part of the hobby. As of 2023, it's gonna be my 4th year in the hobby. I would never, ever buy a Jane or a 910 for the asking price that some of these collectors are asking. My personal rule for myself, my 2nd year in the hobby, was $750 max for any keyboard. Another rule that some of my community has come up with was $10 for every percent. So a 60% keyboard, maximum $600, 75%, maximum $750, TKL $800, I think that's how the math works. And I think that's a good rule. Now, if you buy guac at Chipotle and have 3 international vacations in the business class a year, then you know your own budget and you don't need me to tell you what to do. There are some whales that have come into the hobby, bought every TGR board and then left. I don't understand those people. I grew up differently. If you're a normal ass dude like me, there's plenty of non-TGR options that can sound good in 2023 that won't put you in financial ruin. And that's my explanation of the history of TGR boards from my point of view. Hopefully you learned something. Let me know in the comment section below if you have any questions on anything. Hopefully I can try to answer or maybe make a new video to answer your question. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.